Nerd Morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and today on the Nerd Morning Show, we're going to be talking about Lux, which is an audiobook by Brandon Sanderson and Stephen Michael Bohls. This is going to be a spoiler review. We're diving into the conversation of the book and the things that are going on inside of it. I do have a spoiler-free book review, so check that out on my channel here on YouTube. If you've read the book or you're ready for some spoilers, let's get going. So this is again only available through Audible, and I think that's really interesting. I wonder what the partnership agreement was, or the choices to make it not have a digital version, not to have a print version. But that is essentially what we get here, and I thought it was really good. It was a great audio version. It was voiced by McLeod Andrews, who's the one who also did the audio versions of the other Reckoners books, and I think that he has a great voice for this style of story. The book runs at a runtime of 13 hours, 54 minutes. I listened to my audiobooks a little bit faster, so it took me a little bit less time to get through this story. So we have this main character, Jax, and I think that he is a really interesting character. He's very techie. He loves working with motivators. He's really into his sword. Like, all of those different things make him an interesting and unique character, and makes him different in those ways than David Charleston. But I'm like constantly comparing these two characters as the lead person for the Texas story of the Reckoners versus the main story that we've had previously. And I think, like, techie, David is kind of a nerd where he dives into studying the superpowers and other types of things like that from the different epics. And Jax is all about the motivators and how to derive epic based technology, and so I felt like there were some parallels there. We made him clearly trying to be different by focusing on him being a swordsman versus where David is someone who's really into his guns, and like that type of dynamic I feel like still paralleled itself, but made it so Jax was distinct and unique. But I felt like there was a lot of parallels in their personality and character when you strip away some of those slight adjustments that they have to this style of character. Another character I thought was really, really fun and interesting was Herschel with the peg leg. He was the super spy. I thought he was really fun, and he's one of the first alternate characters that we get introduced to other than Jax, and I think that he was really dynamic, helped keep the team together in good ways. I loved his backstory and the elements they had with the peg leg. Like, right now, diving right in to his way he gets the peg leg, which is a fun element throughout the whole story that we discuss about, like, oh, could it be this, could it be this, and I'm here going through my mind thinking, well, could it be this way or this way? But it being the birth of Steelheart, who was somebody on his like super spy team, and him gaining his powers and going crazy, that being the way that he loses his leg is incredible. And I thought that made it so it tied this in to the original Reckoner stories really, really well. And Herschel's like backstory of that was fantastic. Also, Steelheart is this character that we had feared, but seeing him as a regular person and that moment when he turns to be this like big, big bad was, I thought, absolutely fascinating and one of the most cool moments of this story, particularly for fans of the original Reckoners books. And I don't know, I just loved that. It was really cool to see Prof, him saving Jax as a kid and taking him in and having the struggles of, I don't have good food, I don't cook, I don't do these things, was really, really interesting. And also seeing him kind of have some of that paternal aspects towards Jax was also really interesting, particularly in how later Prof will take in another similar boy like this, which is David Charleston, and get inspired to go and do the great feats that we get from the first set of series books. And I think that was an interesting parallel, maybe lends a little bit more to the perspectives of Prof and who he was pre-Calamity and how he evolved through those last several years until we meet him in the first book with David Charleston. I thought that Paige was really, really interesting. Paige is definitely this friend and romantic interest. And honestly, if they would have had a more romantic element in this, I would not have been surprised because they had all of that foundation of years together working, training, and learning together, and essentially being their own like best buddies and protector. Like there's a pretty dynamic and powerful bond that would be established there. But they still just kind of flirt with that romance, and I don't know, I thought it was fun. It was well done. But Paige on her own, she is this really cool marksman, trained to be a super spy, definitely level-headed. She's less of an assassin than like I would say that Jax is. She seems to care about human life a little bit more, which was interesting into seeing her fight against kind of her programming or training that she got in the coop was interesting as she grew as a character. Also, when she becomes a raven and like inserts herself into the world of Lux, I think that that was really, really interesting and a really cool element that they added in there, which gave it a more strong spy type of vibe there at that part of that story, which I liked. We talked about the Coop a little bit, but the Coop is this spy training place, and I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of like a Red Room experience with like, like Black Widow, but it's one that they're like volunteering to go and have that experience, and essentially we get that through Jax, where he wants to become a hero. He wants to train and do all these things. And Zeph, the trainer, is there to guide him and beat him down in order to be able to build him back up. And Zeph, I thought, was really interesting as a character. He didn't have a lot of words. He was very like drill sergeant-y, and all of those things inside of the story with Zeph as a character were some of my absolute favorite parts of the story. I loved the becoming part that we had in that first half of the story inside of the coop, which is the training center that we talked about. I felt like there was a really formal training experience with the Reckoners that we got here, which I thought contrasted pretty dramatically to how things seem to have operated from the Reckoners in the first books, because we had not only David Charleston, who kind of just inserted himself there, but characters like Missy as well, which I felt were characters who never got any type of formal training. They joined in, were there for the fight, and then they were there in the fight. And this was not the same as we had in this. It was a very like boot camp experience, and I don't know, that was just different, but I liked it. I thought it was a cool element. In fact, like the boot camp spy training part was my favorite part of the book. I thought that the world building that they did around the city of Lux was fantastic. I think Lux is like has a character all on its own, and it being a floating city and kind of having this utopia slash dystopia element in it as well, I thought was really, really interesting. And how people were desperate to climb up the ladders and get to it, but also were the fuel to power Life Force and the Ravens, and them using other individuals to empower themselves. I think had some really interesting commentaries. As the epics of this story, I think that Languish was really interesting, being someone who can take powers, but I don't really have tons to say about that character. Wing Flare I thought was super interesting, having the air powers, her backstory, all of that I thought was really interesting, and her weakness with people like refusing to play games with her, I thought was very interesting, and being able to identify that was, I thought, also very David Charleston-esque from Jax. And with Life Force, he was an interesting villain. He had that capacity to be a gifter and to give people the opportunity to use that same type of powers. And that made it seem like he was almost like good and almost bad, and he was battling that self. And we had this like demon inside of him, which seemed to kind of manifest as maybe when he was using his own powers instead of gifting them. And those type of elements are things that we see linked with how the rules worked in the other books, but there's something unique and different here for Life Force. Also, him using his ability really not to just be able to have super healing or things like that, but essentially to steal life from someone else. If he gets injured, he channels that injury to someone else and then it heals him, essentially trading that health and wellness. I think that that was really, really interesting and super scary and a perfect power for this type of villain. I think that how we worked with Calamity, like disappearing and their scene with that, and other types of story moments where it paralleled with the other books, I thought was really cool. And it just made this one feel like it was part of the same Reckoner's world. And with the potential that this has as it kind of set things up to move forward, we might be able to see people who are epics who are good and people who are epics who are bad, and maybe how those things will have a versus experience. Like we're teased at the very end of the Reckoner's series, but since David got his powers at the end and then we end there, we don't really get to see him be a superhero. And here at the end of this one, we have Paige, who got in a coma because of the things that happened between her and Life Force. And inside of her now lives a little demon who is calling itself Death Rise rather than Life Force. And it essentially was the demon that Life Force had in him. And it is super scary. And it calls itself something other than epic or man. And so this is a new, unique element other than the epics and the essentially the rules and the mythology that we've built up so far. This is something that looks like something unique. And I think this set up for the potential for more books, and I am all for it. I'm excited for that potential, and I would love to see more inside of the Reckoner's universe. What about you guys? What were some of your favorite moments or the things that you thought were the most cool? Let me know. Put those in the comments below. Also, I have content on all sorts of different platforms like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and more at Nerd Morning. So check out those places as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time for another video.